Hello, my name is Jacob Monk. Welcome to a short video about Ukraine. Well, what is the problem in Ukraine? Well, there are many problems. They think that Crimea was stolen from them by Russia. They think the Russians living within the borders of Ukraine, in Lugansk and Donbass, they are trying to have a war against the regime in Ukraine. And also they have just been excommunicated by the Russian Orthodox Church. Well, this is three problems I have read about in the papers and on the internet. You know, Ukraine is a quite poor country. It's one of the most corrupt countries in Europe. And also they had a coup d'etat in 2014 where they expelled the elected president and choose another one. So the government in Ukraine is not really a democratic elected legitimate government. And the only reason that the government being ruling Ukraine now is in power is because America, USA, is supporting them with money and with weapons and with training. Well, Ukraine can be a reason for a very, very serious conflict, maybe even for the Third World War. But let's take the problems one by one. And at the end of this video, you will see I have a solution for all of it. Well, as I told you, 2014 there was a coup d'etat in Ukraine. After that, they held a democratic election in Crimea. 95% of the voters, they voted for Crimea being a part of Russia, not of Ukraine. And after that, Crimea was taken into Russia. They changed their constitution, and since then Crimea has been a part of Russia, just like they have been the last 300 years, because it was only a crazy idea of Khrushchev that made Ukraine in administrative ways a part of Ukraine. When it comes to culture and religion, Crimea has always been a part of Russia. So it is fully in accordance with international law. We have many other cases around the world where population has voted for being connected to a certain state. You can remember the Falkland Islands, for example. They voted to be a part of Great Britain, not of Argentine. Well, in Donbass, it is the eastern part of Ukraine. There are living a lot of Russians. It's mostly a Russian region, and also in the city Lugansk and in the city Mariupol. The citizens, after the coup d'etat 2014, they wanted to be independent of Ukraine, just like they had become in Crimea. And therefore they started a liberation movement, and soon there followed a conflict between the Ukraine army and the new army of Donbass and Lugansk. And this war has been going on since then. Well, it's mostly Ukraine, the Ukraine government, that calls it a war, because this is the key word that opens for the military sources in USA. You know, Ukraine can't be a member of the European Union and NATO because their border questions, their political situation is so complicated. The reason USA is supporting Ukraine is only because this is a way to go against Russia. You know, the main enemy of USA for the last 60 years has been Soviet Union, and after that Russia. Around 10,000 people has been killed in the eastern Ukraine of the weapons that USA has given to the Poroshenko government of Ukraine. Well, this is the military situation, and there is only one solution for that, and that is the Ukraine government says, okay, Crimea is a part of Russia, and we have made some Minsk agreements with Russia, France, USA, and in these Minsk agreements it is said that the eastern part of Ukraine shall be independent, not a part of Russia, but independent. And as soon as the government in Ukraine will follow these decisions that they have been participating in themselves, they have signed these documents. Well, as soon as they do that, then the conflict will end. But at the moment they are just bombing and terrorizing the eastern Ukraine. And the eastern Ukraine do not have the weapons or the means to defend themselves effectively. And I'm afraid that when they once again sign the Minsk agreement, and I'm talking about the government in Kyiv, then this agreement will have no meaning, because their killing of Russians in the eastern Ukraine have been so massive that I don't think ever that the people of Lugansk or Donbass wants to be associated with Ukraine again. And that means that Ukraine has to understand that there is only one solution, that is, Russia is taking over Crimea and the eastern parts of Ukraine. That is the solution. After that, maybe Ukraine can be a part of the European Union or NATO. I don't know. That will be a question that can be solved at that time. But now we have to see at the situation in the Church of Ukraine. And you know, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, then Ukraine declared that they were an independent state, and therefore they also started an independent church, because the church in Ukraine was called the Russian Orthodox Church, and it was led from Moscow. Today the leader of the church in Moscow is called Kirill. You see him on the picture here. Well, this man and his church, they want to run the whole Orthodox world, not only in Russia, but also in all other countries where there are Orthodox churches. And that means they want to run the Orthodox Church in Ukraine too. They don't recognize the Kiev church. They don't recognize the independent Ukrainian church, because this church is not run from Moscow. And Moscow, they believe that they have a right, going back 300 years back, to be the patriarchate of the Orthodox churches. Well, this is some kind of falsification of history, because you know, Moscow is not a patriarchate at all. There were 6 patriarchates according to the old decisions from the first councils of the Christian Church, and Moscow was not one of these patriarchates. So Cyril from Moscow is only a false patriarch. But nevertheless, he wants to run everything in the Orthodox world. But the Ukrainian church wants to be independent, especially now because they believe that they are in war with Russia. They don't want to be run by a patriarch in Moscow, a patriarch that are supporting the Russian troops that is in Crimea and according to Ukraine understanding, they are also in the eastern Ukraine. I don't think this is true, but that is what they believe in the government in Kiev. Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the Kiev Church, they have applied for independence. They have sent a letter to Constantinople, the legitimate patriarch in Constantinople, and they have asked for autocephaly, that is independence. And Moscow has said that this can never happen because Moscow is running the Orthodox Church. The patriarch in Constantinople is nobody. He has got no power, no authority to decide what happens in Ukraine. But nevertheless, the patriarch in Constantinople, today called Istanbul, has told that he will accept the autocephaly, the independence of the Ukrainian Church. That means the Orthodox Church in Ukraine will be split in two parts. One part being run from Moscow and one part being run from Kiev. And the Kiev Church will be an independent and autocephaly church. And what will happen? I'm quite sure the war against the Russian and the eastern Ukrainians, it will continue. And therefore, the anti-Russian feelings in Ukraine, they will continue and maybe even grow. So I suppose within a few years, the Kiev Orthodox Church will be the biggest church, and the so-called Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine will be very small. Maybe it will even disappear. Maybe the government in Kiev will even make it illegal. Well, that will mean that now the whole Orthodox world is split in two, because around 40% of the members of the old Moscow Orthodox Church, they live in Ukraine. They are now members or potential members of the autocephaly Kiev Church. That means that the power of Moscow over the Orthodox religion will decrease very heavily, and probably the independent church in Kiev will seek closer relations not only to Constantinople, to the patriarch in Istanbul, but also to the Roman Catholic Pope in Rome. And that will be very good, because we need a united Christianity, and a united Christianity is heavily wounded since the split in 1954. The Orthodox Church is not a member of the International Christian Church. No, it's not. It is some kind of chaos where they excommunicate each other and go to war against each other. That is what they have done for 1,000 years. Yeah, even more. So the Church of Cyril is a very futile church that is not run according to the principles of the Bible and of the Christian faith. First of all, the Orthodox Church in Russia, they don't want to participate in the international ecumenical councils. The last council was the 21st Council from 1962 until 1965, and the Russian Church didn't want to participate. But the Patriarch in Constantinople, he did participate. And the excommunication, the mutual excommunication of the Roman Catholic Church and the Patriarch in Constantinople, it has been lifted. That happened in 1965. So now Orthodox being united with the Patriarch in Constantinople, They can go to Catholic churches, and Catholics, we can go to the Constantinople churches and go to communion. That is very good. But what is the solution? What is the future? Well, maybe the conflict in Ukraine will escalate if they really try to kill all the citizens of the two big cities in the eastern Ukraine. I'm quite sure the Russians will invade, and there will be some kind of war between Russia and Ukraine. And probably the USA will invade too, and no one can tell what will happen. The best thing would be if the Russians accepted that the church in Ukraine wants to be independent. They want to be a part of the global Christian community. They don't want to be run from Moscow and from Cyril. On the other side, Ukraine has to accept that Crimea and the eastern cities of Ukraine, they belong to Russia. They don't belong to Ukraine. They have another religion, another language, another culture. They don't want to be a part of the Western world. And Ukraine wants to be a part of NATO, of EU, and a part of the European gay community. Already now, the international communion of gay people, they have held several marches in Kiev to demonstrate that today Kiev is not a real Christian city. It is a gay city going against the traditional Orthodox and Catholic and Christian faith. So you have to see the situation is quite complicated. We have to see changes from the church in Moscow and from the government in Kiev. And if we don't see these changes, the conflict will go on. Probably it will be extended and even more evil than now. More Russians will be killed, and maybe they will try some kind of offensive in the land of Ukraine, maybe even in Kiev. And no one can predict what will happen. I prefer the Kiev church because they like the Pope. Being a Catholic, an international Christian, the Pope is the leader of the Christian church. That is the way it has been since Jesus Christ. He gave the key to St. Peter, buried under the church in the Vatican. Well, Russia can't change that. Cyril, the false patriarch of Moscow, can't change that. They have to accept that although the Pope is not allowed to go to Moscow, he can go to Ukraine if he wants. He can go to Istanbul if he wants. And soon he will be going to China too. Well, I'm sorry, the biggest pain in the ass they have in Russia, the biggest pain in the ass they have, it is the false Orthodox Church and the false Pope of Moscow called Cyril. Thank you for listening.